Pakistan's role with Taliban in terms of bringing them in power, supporting them, it is not a secret. It's been very much in the open domain. Pakistan has played it very well in terms of, putting up a facade that they are trying to fight it, but also supporting them simultaneously. From the time of creation of Taliban in the 1990s, and then bringing them in power in 1996, and post 9/11, also seeing that it became the frontline state for United States, but it kept on shielding the top leadership of Taliban, which was sheltered in Pakistan.
As we record this session right now, in this evening, we have heard that the Taliban has formed its cabinet, and some of its key members have been either in Guantanamo Bay or have been the most wanted criminal terrorists in the world. To discuss this, we have an expert on Afghanistan, Pakistan, who has been studying the subject for several years now. She has been an author of many books, and she is a distinguished fellow at the Center for Air Power Studies, New Delhi. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Shalini Chawla. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us. Namaste, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Without further ado, let me go right into the first question, ma'am. We've all seen the Taliban's new government cabinet being announced today. What are your observations?
I mean, the observations in terms of announcement of the cabinet, the personalities, it's not a surprise. Very much expected, is on the expected lines on what the course, the way it has kind of gone ahead. Now, what it kind of indicates the whole process, like so important announcements amongst, I mean, there are obviously 33, I think the number in total cabinet members that they've talked about. But Hassan Akhundzada has been announced as the acting prime minister. Now he has been been a religious kind of his personality has been of a religious teacher. Also, he was in the committee which kind of sanctioned the destruction of the Buddha statues when Taliban was in power in 1996 and 2001. He's held the very important positions of foreign minister, deputy prime minister during that time. And also some of the reports are telling us that, he's kind of arrangement between Baradar and Haqqani, because there was supposedly some kind of tension between these two groups, and he has been appointed who's kind of the middle path. Now, one is obviously how much of a unifying factor he's going to be, that remains to be seen. But secondly, his views, his rigid views, he's a conservative personality, and his views on women's education, banning civic rights, are very well known in the past. So that we will see that connect also, how that reflects into the government, we will see. Then we have Mullah Muhammad Yaqub, who's been announced as the defense minister, who's Mullah Umar's son. That's also not a surprise, because he was appointed as the head of the powerful military commission of the Taliban, and he has been one of the leading personalities in terms of taking over the cities in Afghanistan. Then Baradar has been appointed as acting deputy prime minister. He was instrumental in he was the head of the political office of the group in Doha, and was part of the negotiating team that attempted to thrash out a political deal between which supposed for a peace deal between Taliban and United States. Then Sirajuddin Haqqani, acting interior minister. Now, obviously, he is the the Haqqani network has been known for its use of suicide bombers, and also he's a designated global terrorist. Actually, most of the personalities are at the US and the UN designated terrorists. But he has been, for us, for India, Haqqani has been very well known for his role in 2008 attack on, on the Indian embassy. I mean, these are what it tells us. What do these appointments tell us is obviously Taliban is definitely not in a mood of any inclusivity in the government, obviously, because there's not even a single non-Taliban personality that we see in the cabinet. So there is no concept of inclusivity. There are all their loyalists who are there. Women, definitely, we don't see any scope of women representation there. But some of the personalities who have been appointed there, the Taliban factions, have been known for their very rigid views on banning women education and their liberties. So I think that impact we will see. Now, to what extent we will see, that time has to tell us. But not briefly, if I have to say, it's not a surprising cabinet at all, very much expected, and tells you about the Taliban mindset, that they will go ahead with strictly non-inclusive, only Taliban dominant cabinet and the governance in future.
Right. We are even surprised why some people felt that Taliban 2.0 was going to be inclusive. But anyway, brushing that aside, now the biggest factor in the election of many of these members and nomination of many of these key cabinet members, Pakistan has also played a role. So how do you see Pakistan playing a role behind the scenes with whatever geopolitical developments we are seeing in Afghanistan today?
See, Pakistan's role with Taliban in terms of bringing them in power, supporting them, it is not a secret. It's been very much in the open domain. Pakistan has played it very well in terms of, putting up a facade that they are trying to fight it, but also supporting them simultaneously. From the time of creation of Taliban in the 1990s, and then bringing them in power in 1996, and post 9/11, also seeing that it became the frontline state for United States, but it kept on shielding the top leadership of Taliban, which was sheltered in Pakistan. And then how under General Musharraf in 2003 and 4, we saw resurgence of Taliban, which happened with Pakistan's assistance. And throughout, Pakistan has been instrumental in supporting Taliban and bringing up it to the stage where we see Taliban today. Then the negotiation, and then 2016 onwards, we saw when Sartaj Aziz made a statement in Washington that we have links with Taliban and we will be able to bring them to negotiating table. So those talks started. So they brought them supposedly to the negotiating table, and the deal was negotiated, which was perfect for Taliban and perfect for Pakistan, because for Pakistan, what does it want? It wants a pro-Pakistan regime in Kabul. That is what is in the interest of Pakistan, because it wants to guard its strategic interests. It wants to deal with the challenges of the Durand Line, contested Durand Line. It wants to deal with the rebel voices, Pashtun voices on side, and very importantly, it wants to deny India any space in Afghanistan. And all these factors are very well catered with a pro-Pakistan government in Kabul, and that's what in its mind it has managed to bring. Right. So it has supported Taliban throughout. I don't see any change in that. And in the last week, we have seen lots of action with the ISI chief visiting Kabul. Lieutenant General Fayaz Hamid visited Kabul. Also, Pakistan had a virtual meeting with the critical neighbors of Afghanistan, the delegates from there. It hosted a meeting talking about. So it's kind of created that impression right now. If you see in the last few weeks, the kind of picture it has created, that it is like a one-stop shop for Afghanistan. So whatever anybody wants to talk about Afghanistan, their issues has to go through Pakistan. That's the kind of calculation it has managed to create for itself. And it has played it, I would say, in its own mind, it's playing to its advantage right now. Now, the bigger question is that whether this coming of Taliban in its neighborhood with this ideological victory, will Pakistan actually, what will be the fallouts in Pakistan? I don't think the state is realizing. There are some sensible people in Pakistan who are talking about that fallouts, but it is in that, the sentiments are of their triumphism right now. So in Pakistan, if overall you analyze the sentiment at three levels, I see, one is obviously at the political level, where Imran Khan said that, Taliban has broken the chains of slavery. And then one of the PTI leaders also said that now that we have supported Taliban should support us in Kashmir. She made that statement on the national television. So that political leadership definitely is out and clear, talking indirectly and indirectly that some kind of a return gift from Taliban is expected in return to what Pakistan has done for them. Or the religious groups in Pakistan are seeing this as an ideological victory very, very clearly. We have seen multiple reports. The seminary, some of the seminaries have been putting flags of Taliban. They're singing songs of Taliban. So they see this as a ideological victory. And military has supported throughout. As I said, ISI chief visited there. We have also had reports of the Pakistan military directly and indirectly helping the Taliban fighting the Afghan forces. They were also being treated in the hospitals in the tribal areas. Also, fighters from jihadis from Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar were also inducted into Afghanistan to kind of assist the Afghan national Taliban to fight against the Afghan forces. So that support system has been throughout at the political level, where it has given it legitimacy, in the eyes of the international community. At the military level, where it has assisted Taliban with the logistics. I'm not surprised if it's with arms. There have been reports multiple, and ideological support has been also there. So the Pakistan support has been there. It's going to continue, because in Pakistan's mind, this is a major win for them. It is a win-win situation right now. There are going to be fallouts of this on the state, which we will wait and see. But do the generals realize that at Rawalpindi? I don't think they realize that. They are seeing it as a victory. So to your answer to the question whether the support will continue, I think the support is going to continue in future.
Thank you for that elaborate answer. But since I have also a little background of geopolitics, that makes me ask you this small follow-up. Now, I completely understand when you say that Pakistan has tried to sort of get their own members involved in the cabinet formation, especially with the Haqqani network getting a major piece of the pie. Now, how much, especially when it comes to the Pashtunistan sentiment that the Taliban was wanting probably in 1996, how much of that will Haqqani networks support, right? Because ideologically, there may be differences between Pakistan and the Haqqani network itself. How do the balance between each other?
Are you trying to, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking as in how much of the Haqqani faction in the Taliban would support that interest of Pakistan in terms of controlling the Pashtun sentiments across the border, right? So that's a very, very pertinent question. And you are absolutely right, because what we have seen, the past experience has not shown that support from Taliban. Even when Taliban was in power in 1996 to 2001, we have not seen that support coming from the Taliban. So how that will shape up, we will see. But what I am hearing right now that, definitely Pakistan has managed to get some kind of assurance from Taliban that they will not instigate that nationalism there. They will not raise those voices for the time being, temporary. But this is going to be a temporary phenomena. And you are absolutely right that they will not be able to control for a long time. Sure.
Time will tell us how this will play out. Exactly. But on the streets of Kabul, there is a different sentiment that's been echoing, especially with the civil society. uh, women are coming out in protest against Pakistan. Now, this sentiment was, of course, reflected in the civil society before too, but now they're out on the street. Now, how do you think this is going to play out in the near future?
Now, see, this is it's one part of it gives you some hope that there is, after so much that the Afghans have gone through, they still want to raise their voices, their voice. They really want. They are protesting. Women have, specifically on the women rights and liberties, because women rights and liberties came a long way in Afghanistan. From the repressive regime, what we saw from 1996 to 2001 to now in 2021 till this takeover happened. I mean, it was a phenomenal journey which was covered, with 25% of the parliamentarians being women, and more than about, I think, 65,000 women we had who were working in different segments, teachers, professors, then approximately more than 1,000 journalists. So it was a long journey, and more or less you would agree that that kind of became a benchmark of success for Afghanistan. Multiple other standards, politically kept on struggling. Economically, it was dependent still on the West for everything. But in terms of women rights, it really had this big leap. So that definitely took a complete, hit with the Taliban takeover. And that is that those protests that we've seen women coming out. And Afghans have always, that factor about Pakistan, the negative sentiment about Pakistan has always been in Afghanistan. Even in the personal, professional interactions, I've always seen all the reports. The political leadership never was in sync with Pakistan. We have seen from, the Ghani, multiple statements coming out, then Amarullah Saleh. So, and because for Pakistan, a political regime was never something which was the democratically elected regime, which was close to India, was not something which was acceptable. And that is why this whole issue about getting them off the seat and bringing Taliban has been one of the major policies with Pakistan. Now, how far it will go, it's a good sign that it's happening, but how far it can go without the international support, I doubt. The protest needs the support from the international community. The international community needs to come out and say that this is not acceptable. And there will be fallouts on the Taliban government in terms of isolations or sanctions on Afghanistan and Pakistan also. Then these protests will have an impact. Just the protests without the support from the international community, I doubt can lead to any big change. That's my feeling right now. I can't say, but it doesn't look like, because Taliban believe in the military victory. And that's what they have done till now.
Yes.
So peaceful protests, how much they can change the mindset of Taliban, especially with the cabinet coming in, where they have not even taken any of the representative from the civilian regime. It's their own faction. So how much they will allow these protests to accommodate in their own policy making, I have my doubts. Till they have fallouts from the international community and severe fallouts. Yeah.
And above all that, we've been seeing reports and videos emerging from Kabul about how Taliban has been cracking down against protesters, and it's absolutely disheartening.
But that's their policy. That's their policy, using terror. It's the organization which is believed in terror, use of terror. So how do you kind of feel that can change overnight?
Ma'am, what does this mean for India, especially Kashmir?
So I feel there are there are 2 or 3 very critical aspects. So one is about how does this whole takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban is a major major ideological victory, I would say. So there is going to be a big ideological impact of this whole governance coming there. The belief that this path can lead you to this, that will definitely have an impact on the jihadi organization, on the militant organization, the psychological victory. So that morale, boosting up is definitely going to play a role. So we will see that will impact definitely Kashmir. If not immediately, we will see the impact sooner or later. So we need to guard ourselves. We need to keep this factor into mind. Secondly, Pakistan now will get a freehold in Afghanistan in terms of using that territory to kind of nurture and train anti-India groups, which it can't do on its own territory. And it will be able to now avoid the international scrutiny by doing it in Afghanistan and not in Pakistan.
Right.
It is in the FATF grey list for since June 2018. It has been struggling to get out of it. And now it has that leverage to do it in Afghanistan. So that is the second fallout, that it will intensify its propaganda. Taliban has made varying statement about their support to the Kashmir cause and how they will. Yes. So we have had statements coming that we don't, it's a bilateral issue, but we have also had statements saying that we will take care of the Muslims in Kashmir. So there have been varying statements, but Pakistan will definitely trying to use Taliban support for that fact, for Kashmir cause. And as I said, the PTI leader, she kind of said it on the national TV discussion also. The third factor, the third impact is about our engagement in Afghanistan. We have stakes in Afghanistan. We have invested considerable amount of energy, time, resources. We share very deep cultural ties, and more above everything, we have always stood for the Afghans. We remain committed to the development of Afghan, and we enjoy considerable soft power there. So now that definitely is going to take a hit. Whether now we go ahead and engage with Taliban, lot of it will depend on how Taliban conducts itself, how they position themselves, what are the parameters, which we set in our mind in terms of Taliban meeting those parameters in civic rights, liberty, because India does stand for those values, and we do want to guard our engagement. But we are right now waiting and watching and seeing how the whole how Taliban position themselves in future. So these are the three aspects where I see a fallout in India, the Taliban take over there.
Right. Thank you for that answer. And one more player that's very important to take note of is China, because China has been eyeing a lot of minerals and resources, and even for connectivity in general, it's very important for them. Now, how does Pakistan come into this picture, and why is China so keen on engaging with Afghanistan?
So you're so right about this discussion would have been so incomplete if you did not raise this point about China. So right. China has, I think, three very critical interests in Afghanistan. And it has been guarding it and thinking about it for a very long time. This is not new. Obviously, now it sees the opportunity to engage so actively there because US is not there and with the withdrawal. But China is driven, its entire policy in Afghanistan is driven by its security interests, its economic interests, and its strategic interests. So security, it has been very keen to guard Xinjiang and not getting Uyghurs any support from the Afghan soil. That has been its prime concern. And that has been one of the factors why it established contacts with Afghanistan in Taliban, even in the 1990s when Taliban was in power. And now we have seen since 2012, 14, when the US withdrawal was being talked about and it became increasingly engaged in Afghanistan because it wants to guard Xinjiang. It has eyes on the minerals. It has invested billions of dollars in the Iron copper mine. Nothing has come out of it. More than the minerals, one is that factor, minerals, which I'm not very sure how much of minerals are there, because if actually there was this vast amount of minerals, why did none of the international bodies ever talked about it? So, but yes, that's one of the concerns. But definitely, China sees Afghanistan as a regional connector.
Right.
It sees it as a connector, and it has offered Taliban to join CPC. Taliban is very happy to go. So it sees this as a point which will help it connect to Central Asia, South Asia, and strategically for sure. It wants to leverage the absence of United States. It wants to deny India any space there by engaging itself and expanding its own engagement there. And why it feels that it can do it, the biggest facilitator are two big facilitators. One is Pakistan, who is China's and brother, and China definitely feels that Pakistan is going to help this engagement in Afghanistan. Very rightly it feels that. And secondly, they have the resources where they feel that they will be able to just pump in like they're doing in rest of the world, and Taliban needs the money. Where Taliban knows that these are two or three areas where it feels in its own mind it has assured amount of resources coming in. So they are welcoming the Chinese, and Pakistan is very happy that it will have a partner in Afghanistan. So in Afghanistan, for sure, we'll see an extension of China-Pakistan alliance,
Right.
strategic alliance. Yes.
Thank you so much for all your answers. But if I may ask you a last question, now, of course, there is a distinction in a negative sense in what the Taliban was in 1996 and what the Taliban is right now. But of course, to read between the fine lines about what these distinctions are, especially in terms of strategic interest, in terms of how ideologically Taliban has evolved, how do you see this evolution of the Taliban over the last 2 or 3 decades?
See, I think the evolution in terms of, I personally feel the ideology is the same. If at all, I feel that ideology might be more intensified now with this win.
Right.
The change right now has been in the geopolitical situation. The change has been that there was the US wanted to now leave, so that whole presence of international actors is not there. Their ideology remains the same. Strategy has intensified with time. Last the decade and a half is a long period for them. 20 years is a long period for them to grow and evolve in terms of their military strategies. That has happened. But
Right.
geopolitically, then they have extended support from Pakistan, which had support from China, where Pakistan now did not, in its own mind, doesn't worry too much about the actions from United States in my own mind, because it has the Chinese support. And you will agree with me, because you see that posturing in Pakistan now.
Yes.
So Pakistan's all-out support has been there. So what the difference now can be in terms of the way they rule, that, in 1996 and 2001, they came, Afghanistan was very different. The world did not talk so much about Afghanistan at that time, but right now the entire world is talking about it. Like you spoke about the protests, world is watching about these protests, what they are doing inside. So that international engagement in terms of what's happening in Afghanistan is much more as compared to what it was in the 1996 and 2001. So will that engagement and attention, we don't see actions right now, we are seeing only the international attention. Will the international attention lead to action? And second part is that, will those actions from the international community lead to a behavioral change in Taliban? So that will be the Taliban 2.0, in my view, if that kind of happens. So the changes are more about the geopolitical scenario than the Taliban as an entity. Obviously, they've strengthened much more. They've defeated the superpower. So morally, they are much more strong now. Yes.
So they're absolutely getting a kick out of this right now. But definitely it's absolutely heartbreaking, because I'm sure you have a lot of friends in Afghanistan.
Oh, yes.
They're scattered everywhere. Some of my friends, even though they're these are the luckier ones, right, who got to go to Central Asia and the United States or Europe, even for that
And
matter.
who left in time. who left in
who
time.
left in time. And in fact, even they are very afraid to speak out because they have uncles or aunts or cousins still staying back in Kabul and other areas. But through
This is
this
what
medium,
happened with the ANDSF, right? Because it was not only the soldiers, Taliban managed to capture the areas where the forces, their whole families were there. So that was one factor in weakening of these forces and their inability to continue their fight with the Taliban. But you are saying that they're scared because they have their families in the region, in Afghanistan, and how will they face the repercussions of their speaking out?
yes,
Something that they don't want to, go
right.
ahead.
Let's just hope that things are going to get better and that the Afghan people will see light of the day. Until then, we will keep on updating you viewers about more about what's happening in Afghanistan. Dr. Shalini, thank you so much for taking out your time. I know you've had a very busy day. Thank you so much, and I hope you can join us for much more lengthier conversations on strategic affairs.
Thank you so much, and I really enjoyed conversation with you.
Absolutely, I got to learn a lot too. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.